I'm just a retired aerospace engineer, living a quiet life with my daughter in the suburbs. My old Jeep is my pride and joy, a keepsake from years spent conquering both the skies and the roads. But to Karen, the new HOA president, it was an eyesore that needed to be removed. She didn't just send me a warning, she rallied the entire HOA board, trying to force me to kneel to their absurd rules. What she didn't know? I still had a few toys left, including a Robinson R44 helicopter. That's when the battle began. Not with lawsuits or shouting, but with the roar of a helicopter engine at 6 a.m. every morning. I've always loved two things, my freedom and my Jeep. That boxy, olive-drab beast of a machine has been with me longer than most relationships. It's seen muddy trails in Colorado, tailgates in Texas, and even survived a freak hailstorm in Montana that turned my neighbor's sedan into modern art. So when I finally retired from my job as a flight engineer and settled on a quiet patch of land just outside Ridge Meadows, I thought I'd finally found peace. Enter Karen. Not just any Karen. This woman made nosiness a sport. Bleach blonde helmet hair, matching windbreaker sets for every season, and a walkie-talkie she carried like it was issued by the Pentagon. She wasn't the HOA president. Oh no, that would have required an actual vote. She was self-appointed, which in Karenese means appointed by the divine right of petty. The first complaint came 2 weeks after I moved in. I was in my garage changing the oil on the Jeep when I heard a throat clear behind me, sharp, deliberate. I turned around and there she was, clipboard in hand, lips pursed like she'd just eaten a lemon wrapped in barbed wire. "Sir," she said, drawing out the sir like it pained her to be polite, "we have standards in this neighborhood. Vehicles like that are not visually appropriate." I glanced over at the Jeep, covered in dust and bug splatter from my last weekend trail run. She said, "Vehicles like that, the way some people say criminals," didn't realize this, "was a country club," I replied, wiping my hands on a rag. "Pretty sure my driveway is still my property." She gave me a smile that was more teeth than warmth. "You're within the HOA jurisdiction, and we have rules. Rule 14C clearly states—" I held up a hand. "Karen, right?" She blinked, surprised. "Your name's Karen. Got it. Just wanted to make sure I knew what to write on the cease and desist letter if you step on my property again." She sputtered something about courtesy and community values, then stormed off, muttering into her walkie-talkie like she was calling in an airstrike. I thought that would be the end of it. It was only the beginning. That week, I got my first HOA violation notice, stuffed in my mailbox like a fast food coupon, citing my military-style vehicle as a visual disruption. Never mind the fact that the HOA technically didn't extend to my side of the cul-de-sac. I'd checked the parcel maps, twice. I wasn't in the HOA, but logic doesn't mean much when you're dealing with Karen. The next day, she went bigger. This time she showed up while I was unloading groceries. She waited until I had both hands full before launching into a speech about curb appeal and community expectations. I told her I'd be happy to discuss it as soon as she could produce a legal boundary map showing her jurisdiction. Instead, she handed me a typed letter. It had a fake letterhead and was signed HOA Compliance Director, Karen J. Langston. Folks, she had promoted herself. I knew right then I wasn't just dealing with a bored retiree. I was dealing with a woman who thought she was the law. But what Karen didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I wasn't just any guy with a Jeep and a short fuse. I'd spent 30 years working on helicopters, managing flight operations and building systems that could withstand everything from desert heat to combat zone chaos. And I had friends. Very loud, very powerful friends. I wasn't going to fight Karen with petty notes and backyard gossip. No, I was going to take to the skies. The second violation letter came 3 days later. This time, she left it taped to the hood of my Jeep. The paper flapped in the wind like a white flag. Only it wasn't surrender. It was escalation. In bold, underlined text, She'd cited me for improper vehicle storage and excessive off-road grime. She even attached a photo she'd taken, zoomed in, badly lit, and tilted like she was reporting war crimes instead of dust on a bumper. That's when I realized Karen wasn't just trying to make a point. She was trying to win a battle. And me? I don't lose battles. Not without a fight. Especially not to someone who wears rubber gardening clogs like they're tactical boots. I went inside, poured myself a tall glass of iced tea, and opened my old laptop. Back in the day, I worked as a systems engineer for an airfield maintenance division. I was responsible for drone coordination, flight testing, and the occasional VIP helicopter routing. Let's just say I still had access to some very useful contacts. One of those contacts was Mike Delaney, call sign Buzzkill, retired now, but he runs a flight school about 30 miles outside town, mostly teaches rich dentists how not to crash their weekend toys. But Mike owed me a favor, a big one. Gave him a ring. Buzzkill speaking. "It's Earl. Are you still flying that Bell 206? He laughed. "Depends. You got a budget or a vendetta?" Let's say a little of both. We met up later that week at his airstrip. I explained the situation, showed him the violation, letters, and even played him the audio from my doorbell cam, where Karen claimed she was taking over code enforcement until further notice. Mike leaned back, whistled. "She sounds delightful." I want to remind her I'm not the one boxed in. Mike nodded. "How dramatic are we talking?" I want it to be just subtle enough to be legal, but loud enough that she starts Googling earplugs. He grinned. "Say no more." The next morning, I moved my Jeep back into the driveway, right at the edge of the property line. I even gave it a fresh wash, polished the hood to a mirror shine, and added a tiny flagpole with an American flag waving proudly above the windshield. Just to drive the point home, Karen was out walking her schnauzer when she saw it. She stopped, stared, and scribbled furiously on her clipboard like she was diagnosing a contagious disease. I waved. She didn't wave back. That evening, I got another violation notice. This one was hand-delivered. She didn't even knock, just left it tucked under a decorative rock on my porch, like a raccoon leaving a threat. But the next morning, that's when it got fun. At 6:45 a.m., the sound of rotor blades began echoing over Ridge Meadows, a thumping rhythm that grew louder, closer, until it buzzed right over the HOA clubhouse. The Bell 206 came in low. Not dangerously low, but definitely wake up the neighbors low. It banked once, looped back, and hovered briefly above my property. Karen came running out of her house in her bathrobe and curlers, waving her arms like she was directing traffic at an air show. Mike, ever the professional, held steady for 10 full seconds, long enough for every sprinkler, every security camera, and every homeowner to get a good look. Then he lifted and headed off, disappearing over the tree line. I stood in my driveway, sipping coffee in a lawn chair next to my Jeep. She stormed up minutes later, hair frazzled, face red, voice trembling with rage. "What on earth was that?" she shouted. "Training flight," I replied. "My property's outside the HOA's airspace last I checked." "You're disturbing the entire neighborhood." I leaned back. "Funny. You never seem to mind disturbing me," she pointed, a shaky finger at my Jeep. This is harassment," I shrugged. "No laws against helicopters, Karen, but if you'd like to file a complaint, I suggest you contact the FAA. She didn't say anything, just stomped back to her house, slamming the door so hard her fake wreath fell off the hook. Later that day, I heard whispers from across the street. Chuck, the retired UPS guy, leaned over his fence and gave me a thumbs up. Another neighbor brought me banana bread and said, "Not a fan of noise, but that was worth it." It wasn't just about the Jeep anymore. Karen had drawn the first line. Now I was drawing the airspace. If you thought the helicopter flyover would scare Karen into retreat, you don't know Karen. She doesn't back down. She doubles down, usually with a new clipboard and a fresh batch of threats printed in Comic Sans. 2 days after Mike's flyover, I got an official-looking envelope taped to my mailbox. I say official-looking because it had the HOA logo at the top, but I know for a fact Karen printed it herself. The ink was smudged, and the watermark said, "Test Page." The letter began, "Dear resident, it has come to our attention that unauthorized low-altitude aircraft activity has disturbed the peaceful environment of Ridge Meadows. Such actions may violate HOA policies regarding noise, safety, and common decency." Common decency? This from a woman who once screamed at the mailman for using the wrong sidewalk. The letter went on to say that I had 72 hours to cease and desist all aerial operations or face formal escalation to the HOA disciplinary board. Mind you, I'm not in the HOA. A minor detail Karen still refused to accept. She acted like jurisdiction was a suggestion. But the best part, she included a printed copy of a noise complaint form that she clearly made in Microsoft Word, complete with a box labeled, "Please describe the offending sound." Underneath, in shaky handwriting, someone had written, "Rotor thunder and smugness." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the page in my birdbath. But I didn't get mad. I got strategic. I called Mike. "Hey, Buzzkill," I said. "How do you feel about doing a hovering approach?" He chuckled. "Are we escalating?" "No," I said. "We're educating." That Saturday morning, Mike flew in just after sunrise. Quiet at first, barely a hum on the horizon. But as soon as he crossed the HOA boundary line, he dipped, the nose slightly, and hovered over the treetops. This time, we weren't alone. I'd invited a few neighbors over, the ones who'd thanked me, the ones who brought cookies or had quietly cheered from behind blinds. We set up folding chairs, had coffee in thermoses, and even grilled a few sausages. I called it the Freedom Fly-In. When Karen stormed out of her house, robe, curlers, and now safety goggles, why, the whole street watched. Mike circled twice, never breaking a single FAA rule, before gently pulling away and heading back to base. The crowd applauded. Someone started a slow clap. Karen shouted something unintelligible about air traffic safety and foreign intimidation tactics. She pointed her phone at us, filming like she was building a case for Judge Judy. One of my neighbors, sweet old Mrs. Barker, who knits sweaters for squirrels, leaned over and whispered to me, "You know, Earl, this is better than cable." But Karen wasn't done. That evening, I got another letter. This time it slipped under my front door, not taped, not mailed, just there, like a mafia warning, but with worse grammar. You have until Monday to remove the offending vehicle, the Jeep, cancel all future helicopter visits, and restore neighborhood harmony. If not, legal steps will follow. She underlined legal steps 5 times. I didn't respond. Instead, I called a friend from my old flight team, Rick, a crop duster out near Bakersfield. He flies a vintage plane, slow, loud, and bright yellow. Asked him for a flyby, but not for me, for Karen. She wanted escalation. I was about to give her an air show. Monday morning rolled around, and if Karen thought her scribbled ultimatum was going to intimidate me, she clearly hadn't read the fine print on my patience. I hadn't just ignored her demands, I'd upgraded my response. At exactly 8:03 a.m., the sky began to hum again. Only this time it wasn't Mike's sleek black chopper. It was Rich. In a bright yellow 1956 Piper Cub with checkerboard wingtips, sputtering across the clouds like a flying lawnmower with attitude. The thing moved slowly, low and loud, very loud, not illegal, not even against any noise ordinances, just deliberately Karen unfriendly. And the best part? He was towing a banner, a 20-foot-long nylon streamer flapping behind him in the breeze that read, "I'm not in your HOA, Karen." You could see it from 3 blocks away. It was glorious. Karen? She saw it too. She was already outside, phone in hand, bathrobe flapping like a cape caught in a wind tunnel. Her expression shifted from sleepy confusion to nuclear-level rage in under 3 seconds. I watched from my porch with a mug of coffee and a box of powdered donuts. Rick did a slow, lazy loop, not directly over her house, but close enough to let the tail banner flutter dramatically over Ridge Meadows. People emerged from homes. Some squinted into the sun, others pointed and laughed. And one guy, bless him, actually saluted. Karen marched into the middle of the cul-de-sac like she was directing traffic at a meltdown. She waved her phone like a conductor's baton, shouting at no one in particular, "This is harassment! This is terrorism by aviation!" Rick did a second pass. I could see him tip his wings in acknowledgement. The crowd cheered, and that was the moment it happened. Karen stepped directly into the path of her own HOA landscaper's trailer, which had just turned into the street. The poor guy swerved, clipped her recycling bin, and sent 3 Diet Coke cans flying into the air like confetti. One of them landed right at her feet and exploded. The image, Karen in a soaked robe with a banner mocking her flying overhead, might as well have been printed on a victory flag. But I wasn't celebrating just yet, because about 20 minutes later a sheriff's deputy pulled into my driveway. Now, this wasn't my first rodeo. I stood up, already holding the same easement documents I'd shown before, ready for another performance. But the deputy wasn't here for me. He smiled. "Mr. Lawson," he said, tipping his hat. "No issues here. Just a courtesy visit." I blinked. "Courtesy?" "Yep," he said. "We've been getting a lot of noise complaints from one specific address, and we already reviewed your flight permits. You're clean. Legally, she's got no leg to stand on. But between us?" He leaned in. "That banner? Chef's kiss." We both laughed. He tipped his hat again and left. I looked back toward Ridge Meadows. Karen had retreated indoors. No clipboard, no yelling, just silence. That night, Rick called me. "Want to go bigger?" he joked. "Maybe a crop circle next?" I laughed. "Not yet, buddy, let her stew." Because I knew Karen. She wasn't beaten, just wounded. She'd come back, probably with some new emergency HOA ordinance printed from her inkjet, triple underlined and filled with vague threats. But for now, I had altitude, leverage, and half the neighborhood rooting for me. And Karen, well, she had an empty recycling bin and a face full of soda. The next day started quietly. Too quietly. No leaf blowers, no HOA landscapers, no passive-aggressive flyers about unauthorized color choices taped to mailboxes. Even Karen's house, normally a beehive of early morning clipboard activity, was still. I knew that look. It was calm before a very specific kind of HOA Karen storm. Around 11:30 a.m., I got a call. "Hi, this is Deputy Rayner. Mr. Lawson, we need to talk about a temporary restraining order filed in your name." I blinked. A restraining order? Who'd I allegedly restrain? He sighed. "Technically, a helicopter." I nearly dropped my coffee. Turns out Karen had marched into the county clerk's office with a folder full of noise complaints, blurry screenshots of Rick's yellow Piper, Cub, and, I kid you not, a hand-drawn diagram of sky trespassing zones. She had written "my airspace" in Sharpie and drawn a giant angry face over my property line. The clerk thought it was a prank. The judge, however, thought it was hilarious. Deputy Rayner couldn't stop chuckling when he told me she claimed that the banner defamed her in midair. Said the noise gave her a migraine aura that lasted 2 days and ruined her HOA planning session. I asked her what law was broken. She said, and I quote, "the moral code of suburban tranquility." He paused. Anyway, the judge tossed it in 6 minutes. Rick's flying free. I laughed. Hard. But here's where it got funnier. Apparently, during her tantrum at the courthouse, Karen loudly mentioned that she was going to install anti-aircraft countermeasures on her property. This, naturally, got the attention of actual law enforcement. By sundown, she'd been visited by the Sheriff's Department and the FAA. No joke. An FAA agent showed up at her door because someone reported a woman threatening to take down an unauthorized aircraft with a modified water cannon. It was her pool cleaner. She had zip-tied it to a bird bath and painted it black. I watched the whole thing from my living room window. Karen argued with two federal agents while trying to explain that a PVC pipe connected to a garden hose was non-lethal aerial defense. They didn't arrest her, but they did leave her with an official warning. Any attempt to interfere with aircraft could result in felony charges. She slammed her door so hard her plastic lawn flamingo tipped over. The next morning I got a letter in the mail. It wasn't from Karen. It was from Rick. Inside was a photo of the banner mid-flight and a handwritten note. They grounded Amelia Carenhart yet? Let's do one more lap this weekend. On the house. I laughed so hard I nearly spit out my cereal. But as fun as it all was, I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't someone who lost quietly. She was someone who retreated, regrouped, and came back with a binder full of revenge. So I did what any ex-helicopter pilot with a mild talent for mischief would do. I made a plan. Not to humiliate her. That part kind of took care of itself. But to end this, once and for all. It was Sunday morning when the flyers hit. Not just one or two, dozens. Taped to stop signs, tucked under windshield wipers, shoved through every front door in the neighborhood. Emergency HO meeting. Community under aerial attack. Subtitle: Discussing measures to counter illegal aircraft activity and restore neighborhood peace. I almost choked on my bacon. Karen, apparently undeterred by FAA warnings, had doubled down. She was now leading something called the Sky Defense Task Force, which sounded like a rejected G.I. Joe cartoon, but was very real and very, very dumb. Went outside and found a flyer taped to my mailbox with glittery duct tape. It had a picture of a plane, Rick's, obviously, flying overhead with a photoshopped shadow of a missile beneath it. You couldn't make this up. That afternoon, I drove past the clubhouse where the emergency meeting was being held. I swear it looked like a cosplay of a neighborhood militia. There was Harold, the retired dentist, standing with a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt and holding a pair of binoculars backward. Marcy, the lady who once yelled at me for parking too close to the curb, was stringing up orange pool noodles like barricades near the garden center. And then there was Karen, wearing what looked suspiciously like an old Girl Scout sash, now adorned with badges that read AR Safety, Community Order, and, I kid you not, Defender of Peace. I parked across the street, leaned against my truck, and sipped my iced tea like it was front row at a sitcom taping. Karen stood in front of a folding table stacked with maps, legal printouts, and an old copy of the HOA bylaws, highlighted, like it was the Bible. She tapped her clipboard and began. Fellow residents, the skies above our homes have become battlegrounds of intimidation and noise pollution. The time has come for Oak Ridge Estates to reclaim its tranquility. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a folder from the passenger seat and walked across the street. She noticed me about halfway through her monologue. Her voice faltered like a scratched record. "Mr. Lawson," she said, forced smiling. "This is a closed HOA meeting." "I'm not here to join," I said calmly. "Just figured I'd bring some facts to the party." I laid the folder on the table. Inside, my property deed FAA regulations about low-altitude flight paths county zoning maps, a notarized letter from the FAA agent who warned her 3 days ago, and, just for fun, a laminated copy of the airspace boundary showing her house is still 150 feet from mine. The room went quiet. Karen reached for the papers like they were radioactive. "I understand you're frustrated," I said, loud enough for the others to hear. But trying to regulate the sky isn't just dumb, it's dangerous. You filed false claims. You called in unauthorized contractors. You tried to intercept a banner with a garden hose. Gasps. I turned to the group. And now you want to spend HOA dues on an aerial threat task force? Folks, this isn't about peace. This is about one woman who doesn't like that she can't control everything she sees. Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Then Rick's banner plane flew overhead. Perfect timing. Trailing. A new message. Oak Ridge loves freedom and fresh air. The crowd craned their necks. Harold lowered his binoculars and clapped. Karen's eyes narrowed like she was trying to shoot lasers. "I hope this is a joke," she hissed. "It's not," I said. "But this is." I pulled out a final sheet of paper, a cease and desist letter drawn up by my lawyer. Not just against Karen, but the HOA as a whole. Harassment, slander, defamation, property interference, the works. I wasn't going to, press charges, I said. "But you keep escalating, Karen. You've put your entire board at risk." Vanessa, one of the few reasonable board members, leaned over and whispered something to Karen. Karen shook her head violently, arms crossed. But I saw the change in the crowd. The spell was breaking. Murmurs turned into questions. Why were they spending money on this nonsense? Why hadn't they read the bylaws more closely? Why was Karen making all the decisions? I didn't need to stay. The dominoes were falling on their own. I nodded at Vanessa on my way out. "Call me when you're ready to fix this," I said. "Otherwise, I'll see you in court." It was 2:13 a.m. when my motion camera pinged. Now, I'm not usually awake at that hour, but ever since the banner incident and the HOA's failed sky defense campaign, I'd been sleeping a little lighter, just in case Karen decided to trade in her clipboard for camo paint. The alert showed movement near the north fence line. Not unusual. We've got raccoons, deer, even the occasional teen couple sneaking off to be closer to nature. But this time was different. The shape was too upright, too cautious, and carrying what looked like a shovel. I sat up, grabbed my boots, and pulled the live feed up on my tablet. Sure enough, two figures were tiptoeing along the outer edge of my property. One was unmistakably Karen, red windbreaker, hunched determination. The other was a guy I didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing jeans and a reflective vest that looked like it was stolen from a highway crew. They stopped at the edge of the drainage trench, the very one I'd installed a decade ago to prevent stormwater overflow from the HOA lot next door. Then Karen pointed. The guy started digging. Oh no, not again. This time, I didn't wait. I grabbed my flashlight, my phone, and the hard copy of my property survey tucked neatly inside. A folder labeled Karen Insurance. Then I walked out the back, keeping quiet until I was close enough to hear them whispering. "Just cut it here," she hissed. "It should redirect the runoff back toward his garden. That'll teach him to interfere with the HOA. My boots crunched against the gravel. Both heads whipped around like raccoons caught in the trash. "Evening," I said, aiming the flashlight right at them. "Doing a little late-night landscaping?" Karen froze. The man, her mystery accomplice, dropped the shovel with a dull clank. "This is maintenance," Karen stammered. "We had a vote, emergency erosion control." "On my private property?" I raised an eyebrow and tapped the folder in my hand. "Because this survey here shows that ditch, and the 6 feet around it, is entirely within my easement. So unless your HOA recently annexed my backyard, you're trespassing." Her jaw clenched. "Don't be dramatic," she spat. "We're protecting the neighborhood." "Ironic," I said. "Because I just texted Deputy Rayner. He's protecting my neighborhood, and he's about 3 minutes out." The man looked ready to bolt. Karen grabbed his arm. "Don't move," she snapped. "He's bluffing." I wasn't. 2 minutes later, the familiar glow of cruiser headlights cut through the trees, and the distinct crunch of tires on gravel echoed across the field. Rayner stepped out slowly, his flashlight already aimed at Karen. "Evening, folks," he said in that tired, small-town cop tone that meant someone's about to get cuffed or lectured. "Earl, want to explain what we've got here?" "Caught them mid-dig, Rayner," I said. "Trying to sabotage my drainage line. Again, on camera this time." Karen turned, frantic. "This is all a misunderstanding. I thought this was common. HOA property." "Karen," Rayner interrupted, holding up a hand. "Did you file any notices of entry, any permits, any formal complaints?" She opened her mouth. "Closed it," Rayner signed. "Ma'am, this isn't the first time we've had to explain easement law, or trespassing, or sabotage for that matter." He looked over at the man next to her. "Sir, do you work for the county?" "No." "Are you licensed?" "Not really." Rayner pulled out his notepad. "Well, you're both going to need to explain that down at the station." That's when Karen lost it. "This is harassment," she shrieked. "He's manipulating the HOA, using his land to bully us. He planted that trench on purpose." Rayner didn't even blink. "You're under no obligation to speak without a lawyer, ma'am, but every word's being recorded." I leaned in just slightly and said, "You might want to save the theatrics for court." She glared at me like I'd stolen Christmas. The next morning, the entire neighborhood knew. It started with one post on the Oak Ridge Facebook group, a blurry photo of Karen being escorted to the cruiser, followed by, "So, anyone else thinking we vote for new leadership before she tries to redirect a river?" By noon, the HOA board had called an emergency meeting without Karen. By dinner time, they'd voted to suspend her indefinitely pending legal investigation. Meanwhile, I was getting phone calls, not angry ones, polite, sheepish ones, offers to help with repairs, questions about how water easements worked. Someone even asked if I'd ever considered running for the HOA board. I declined politely. The truth was, I didn't want power. I wanted peace. But now, thanks to Karen's midnight mission, the rest of the neighborhood was finally seeing what I'd seen all along. This wasn't about bylaws or property lines. It was about control. And when she couldn't have it anymore, she tried to break what she couldn't rule. Well, she broke the rules instead. And I had every shovel mark, every pixel of footage, every frantic excuse to prove it. The only thing Karen had left was a lawyer. The hearing wasn't dramatic, at least not in the way you'd expect. No screaming, no thrown clipboards, no HOA board members storming out with pearl necklaces askew. Just a modest county hearing room with beige walls, bad coffee, and one big decision to make: whether Karen Reynolds had knowingly trespassed, damaged private property, and endangered public utility infrastructure. Spoiler, she had. The evidence spoke for itself, literally. I brought a flash drive, containing video footage from 3 angles, audio clips of her giving orders, and the signed easement documents dating back to when her HOA was still just a dusty plot on a planning map. Her lawyer tried everything. Claimed she was acting in the best interest of the community. Claimed she believed the line was unregistered. Claimed I intimidated her into poor judgment. But even the judge raised an eyebrow at that. "I see a lot of poor judgment." "Ms. Reynolds," she said, "but none of it appears to be intimidating, just overconfident." The ruling came swift and sharp. Karen was found liable for trespassing and property damage. No criminal charges unless she violated the no-contact order. But she was ordered to pay for repairs, legal fees, and issue a formal apology in writing and in public. At the next HOA meeting, that last part wasn't my request. It was the board's. They'd finally grown a spine. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I'd felt in months. Not because I'd won, but because I hadn't had to swing. I'd let the facts, the footage, and Karen's own hubris do the heavy lifting. And now it was over. Or so I thought. A week later, as I was tightening the last valve on my newly reinforced water control system, I heard footsteps on gravel. Slow. Hesitant. Not HOA bold. Not sheriff confident. Just tired. I turned to see Karen. No clipboard. No walkie-talkie. No windbreaker that made her look like she was directing traffic at a middle school soccer game. Just Karen. Plain clothes, hair tied back, holding an envelope. "I'm not here to argue," she said, voice low. "Just here to read what I was ordered to read." I nodded. She unfolded the paper, hands trembling just slightly. "I apologize for the actions I took as HOA president," she read, avoiding my eyes. "I acknowledge that I trespassed on private property and caused damage to a legally registered water control system. I acted without board approval, without permits, and with poor understanding of local infrastructure. I accept full responsibility." Then she looked up. "That's all." "No, it's not," I said gently, reaching into my back pocket. "You forgot this." I handed her a drawing, a crayon sketch of a tomato plant with a smiley face, signed by one of the neighborhood kids. The one that used to visit my garden before the whole water war started. Karen stared at it for a long moment. "I never meant to... all of this." She trailed off. "I know," I said. "But meaning well isn't the same as doing right." She nodded. Silent. Then turned and walked away down the dirt road, shoulders slightly lower than when she arrived. She didn't come to another meeting after that. Rumor had it, she put her house up for sale a few weeks later. I didn't follow up. I had other things to do, like finishing the irrigation system for the new community garden the HOA voted to start, on my suggestion. They asked me to help design it. I agreed with one condition: no pipes without permits and no digging without. Donuts. That got a laugh. A month later, we held a little ceremony by the edge of the field. Someone brought lemonade, someone else brought music, and someone, bless them, brought 4 dozen jelly-filled pastries from the bakery downtown. As the first faucet turned on and water sprayed into the fresh beds of vegetables and sunflowers, a cheer went up. No banners, no backroom politics, just neighbors. And water, flowing freely, the way it always should have. In the end, the HOA not only had to retract all warnings, they issued an official apology. As for Karen, she resigned after a no-confidence vote, retreating in silence with messy hair and haunted eyes every time a helicopter passed overhead. Me? I still drive my Jeep every evening, still take flight on weekends, and sometimes I stop to teach the neighbor kids how to pitch tents and read the wind. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to remind them. Don't mess with a man who once commanded 1,000 horsepower in the sky over an old Jeep parked in his driveway.